I'm head of a German Maritime Museum, a professor for history at the University of Bremen. Today, we will focus on a very specific part of our heritage, which has been in our focus quite a while. We would like to talk about the Samoan traces and Samoa as a part of a German colonial history, connected a lot to maritime factors like ships, shipping lines, harbor infrastructure, and all the interests, the economic interests and cultural aspects connected to these maritime topics. In this research depository, we would like to not only look and preserve at our objects, but we would like to do real thorough research connected to our items and artifacts. And therefore, I'm really more than happy to welcome Tony Brunt here. He is he's not only one of the world's leading specialists on colonial photographies on Samoa. This is the reason why he's giving the talk here, but he's also a very prominent figure in the political history of New Zealand, because he founded in the 70s one of the first ecological party, I think, in New Zealand. And this is part of also a larger, bigger global movement, I think, in the 70s to become aware of the environment and the need to protect it. This is also, I think, connecting your biography, your career with the German Maritime Museum in a sense, because we also try to raise the awareness for preserving the ocean as a part of a human cultural heritage. Mm-hmm. I also welcome Tony Goebel, Tobias Goebel, not Tony, who has worked with us at the German Maritime Museum since a couple of years on the role of shipping lines, especially the North German Lloyd, and not focusing on Africa, as a lot of colonial history projects do, but focusing on the Pacific, and therefore taking into the focus one of the regions where colonial German traces are very prominent to be seen. We will proceed like this, that Tony Brunt will give a talk on his research, and he will also touch a bit upon some things I think we see over there in the showcases. You both have been looking at our collection and bits and pieces during the past days. And after the talk, you will both engage a bit in a panel talk, and maybe we have all the possibility to ask questions. And therefore, I'm also welcoming the audience of this talk, which is part of a seminar at the University for Maritime Colonial History, but also part of the team of the German Maritime Museum and one guest from Berlin. Welcome you all here. I'm very excited and happy about this event. And I would like then first to ask you to start with your talk.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ruth. And after an introduction like that, even I'm anxious to hear what I've got to say, whether I diverge into a political speech or remain with history. But I think tonight I'll remain with history. Thank you very much. Of course, I have appeared before in a museum event, the Seeing the Other conference, which unfortunately had to default to a Zoom conference several years ago. So I didn't get a free trip to Germany at that time. I had to sit in our small study and deliver my speech. But so it's very good to be here in the flesh. And thank you for your kind introduction. And I'd also like to acknowledge Tobias Goebel, who has been so supportive and helpful over the last several days with research that I've been honored to carry out here, looking at through albums. And I know most of them are not, well, most of them are digitized, but not online. So it's really a wonderful opportunity to get an inside view. And I'd also like to introduce my wife, who's sitting in today. She's accompanied Fee, who's accompanied me to Germany during my time here. She's running quality assurance on my appearances, and so that I remain on the straight and narrow. So Fee is here. She actually comes from perhaps the most patriotic region of Samoa. And I say that verges on chauvinism, but she's a very proud woman from the district of Whalealili in Samoa. So I should acknowledge Fee. But I have been with Tobias in the last several days, having a look through some albums, not a lot that are connected with Samoa, but some very important and some very exciting discoveries from my point of view. And I'm wondering if we could just bring up on the screen the my presentation. So
Dim the light.
yeah, cool. So I've got a photographic treasures from the DSM, some observations, not just on the Samoan related albums, but also on Pacific related albums as well. So just some conclusions. There are individual photos of historical importance to Samoa and doubtless to other Pacific islands that do not appear to be present in other known collections. So they are present in some of the albums that we've had the privilege of looking at. The albums assembled by Navy sailors in the DSM collection appear to have a combination of commercially available snapshots bought from Apia photographers, of which there were 3 during the late 1800s and early 1900s, together with pictures they've obtained from the ship's photographer. Images of historical importance were taken by ship's photographers, and there are also interesting for me that there are also images on display in these albums taken by Apia photographers that we have not seen before. We can confirm my suspicion that naval photographers made available some of their work to the local residents in Samoa. There are many album photos taken by naval photographers that relate more broadly to the activities of the German Navy in the East Asian theatre, which are of excellent quality and which excite me as a general historian rather than as one focused purely on the South Pacific. So I get excited when I see a really crisp, clear documentarian photograph taken in any place. And there were plenty from Asia in the albums that I looked at. Oops. So the few albums available relating to Samoa and its environs appear to have passed to the DSM through civilian legacy channels rather than through Navy channels. And it seems likely to me anyway that major official collections taken by ship's photographers during voyages in the East Asian and Pacific theatres reside still in the archives of the German Navy at Freiburg. Right, let's focus in on my earlier comment. There are individual photos of historical importance to Samoa that do not appear to be present in other known collections. And this album in particular, which dated to the trip by the naval vessel SMS Bussard through the Pacific in 1895 to 1897 was very, very valuable in my opinion. And this is a very exciting photo. It might not look it, but the man in the middle at the back in the white clothing is Samoa's paramount chief, Mataafa Yosefo. And I've zoomed in on this photo and I could tell it was taken in Jaluit in 1896 when he'd been exiled by the three powers, Britain, the USA and Germany, to the Marshall Islands. And one of the interesting aspects of this photo to me is that one of the orators sitting on the ground has got a collapsible orator's stick, or laonga, and he's broken it in half or unwound it in half, and he's holding the half that's as high as he is. But let's have a very quick look at this guy Mataafa Yosefo, because he's an interesting character. He inherits one of the highest titles in Samoa, but it's not just because he was perhaps next in line. He also has the force of personality, and he makes a major mark on Samoan and German history, I might add. He exudes a gravitas and a quiet authority that his rivals do not have. He is a smart, skilled commander of men and has a painstaking courtesy, deep religious convictions. In fact, he became a celibate Catholic from his middle years, and a highly respectful manner that insists, for example, on use of the correct honorifics and diplomatic circumlocutions in both writing and verbally when addressing foreigners and the German administration later on. However, he has notions of greater Samoan self-determination, and he is destined to become Samoa's last great leader before independence in 1962. He comes into prominence in September 1888 when he assembles a large force and successfully rebels against the German-backed chief Tamasese. Tamasese's forces retreat to Molinuu and Apia, where a German gunboat offers protection. The Germans bombard villages sympathetic to Mataafa. This bloody civil war rages fitfully along the northern coast of Upolu and around Apia for a few months. Everything suffers. Warships from the three powers are anchored in Apia Bay with the three consuls and ships' captains squabbling with each other, trying to sort the situation out. But then on the 19th of December 1888, the German Navy makes a tragic mistake. Under cover of early morning darkness, 140 Marines come ashore from the SMS Olga on a reckless mission to protect the German trading company, the DH&PG, Deutsche Handels- und Plantage- and Gesellschaft plantation at Wailele, and disarm belligerents. The Samoans have no idea what's going on, and they perceive it as an assault on them. Though Mataafa is not in the vicinity at the time, his warriors resist the force, and between 28 and 30 Germans are killed or later die of wounds, and maybe another 25 are wounded but survive. Many have their heads cut off as traditional Samoan trophies of war. It's the biggest loss of German soldiers anywhere in the imperial period, from what I can gather, and probably right up to the First World War. People here might know of other instances, but that's my assumption. So it establishes his reputation as a man to be treated with respect. It also alienates him from the German government and especially the Navy, who hate his guts, and means that despite being the most popular man in Samoa, he cannot be king. In Germany's possessions in the Western Pacific, a disruptor like Mataafa would have been hunted down and executed, but the man is not rebelling against a legally constituted German administration. He's rebelling against dynastic rivals, so a charge of rebellion cannot be laid. And instead, the Germans bide their time, and in 1893, after conflict between competing Samoan forces and with the consent of the Tridominium partners, Mataafa is cornered and taken into custody. He's exiled with his adult daughter and a small party of supporters to Jaluit Atoll. In 1898, he and his party are returned to Samoa, so they're away for 5 years, and in a move of political expedience, somewhat reminiscent of the rise of Nelson Mandela, he is recognized by the Tridominium partners as the rightful paramount king or chief of Samoa, and serves in that capacity in partnership with the German administration, which came into Samoa in 1900, and he dies in 1912. So that's the only other photo I've ever come across of Mataafa on Jaluit. That's his daughter Kalala standing beside him, and I only know one of the chiefs, the young man sitting on the ground, second from the right. That's Sauni of Tufulele. And then apart from that photo, we really have this photo, which is much clearer and very, very valuable in my opinion. So that is an exciting find. And these men are pretty much all orators. They've got the orator's staff, that's a Marshallese type house behind, which differs quite significantly from a Samoan type house. The other photo that really excited me was this one of the German school in Apia. This was a private setup started by settlers in the 1880s, and it was supported by the German Foreign Office and the German Colonial Society. And then it was taken over by the German administration of Samoa in 1903. And only about 4 or 5 photos of the school and its pupils from the early years are in existence. And this is the first time I've seen this particular one. This one I found in a box in a basement in West Auckland in the Spayman family collection, a damp basement. All the photos were getting moldy. And this one I had to substantially restore through photo editing to get it back into good shape. And we see a photo being held up. This was taken in 1900, whereas the other one, the Deutsche School one, I think was probably about 1895. And so this was taken at a place called Papase'ea Waterfalls, school outing. And that's the only other photo that I've come across. It was from the Mitchell Library, from the Paula David collection in the Mitchell Library in New South Wales. And one of the school's founders, the gentleman third from the left at the top, Hugo Gebauer, is in this photo. And to his left, a woman from Germany who was also a teacher, Ludovika Scholze. And a few of the pupils I recognize by name. So this is a very valuable photo. And they've dressed the pillars of the school with palm tree branches, especially for this shoot. These were 2 photos from the album, one from Apia, allegedly Apia in 1895, and one from the port of Pangopango in American Samoa in 1896. I have some doubts that the one on the left was from the central port of Apia, because the women are not so conservatively dressed as they are from Pangopango, on the one on the right. I actually feel this photo may have been taken in a more provincial part of Samoa, perhaps the harbour at Sauluafata. But I don't come to these photos with any ideological or cultural baggage. I think they're charming, people having fun, fine. A photograph of at Papase'ea Waterfalls that was in one of the albums, and I think most of these men are from Navy ships, because I don't recognise any of them. Again, I think some of these are called Apia, but I'm not necessarily convinced that they are from Apia. This doesn't look like any of the foreshore around Apia, but it could be nearby. And this is the only photo I've ever come across of someone in naval diving gear from the turn of the century. This is not Samoa. This is a bit of a find, I think. And Tobias and I worked out that this is from the port of Levuka in Tonga on the island of Ovalau. And it used to be the capital of Tonga up until about 1877. It's now a UNESCO heritage town. Most of its old portside architecture has been retained. And this is one of the clearest photos, I think, that exists certainly from the late 1800s of Levuka. It's on a very tiny island beside the main islands of Tonga, and much of its architectural heritage has been retained. The caption of this photo allegedly says this is Lord Howe Island, but it can't actually be the well-known Lord Howe Island, which is at the northern Tasman Sea. But I think it's a great photo, and I put it up. The thing about Lord Howe Island is that archaeology has established that it was never settled by Polynesian explorers. And it was in the late 1700s that Europeans came across it, and there was small settlement built up. But so this has to be somewhere else in the Western Pacific. I think Tobias has certain ideas on where it might be. But I put it up because I think Lord Howe is a very interesting island. It is probably the largest island in Polynesia, in tropical Polynesia, that was not settled by early Polynesian explorers. They were an amazing bunch. But this island seemed to have been off their circuit. And just to have a look at, let's just have a look at the prehistory. So it was discovered by Europeans in 1788, apparently uninhabited, no evidence of prehistoric human activity, even after an extensive archaeological investigation in 1996. The absence of pre-European settlement is not easily explained, as larger and equally remote subtropical islands in the Pacific were found. Its southerly latitude will have been a factor in this avoidance of discovery. Let's just have a look. So you can see on lower left, Lord Howe Island is quite a bit south. What happened, of course, just to brief you, there were land bridges right across here 50 and 60,000 years ago when Australia and Papua New Guinea and some of the Solomon Islands were settled. The explorers didn't need boats with two hulls with outriggers that could travel on blue water. And then so that the exploration of the Pacific stopped. And then about 5,000 years ago, the Polynesians, as they were later known, came out of Taiwan, came down on what one Australian anthropologist has called a fast train. And they came down, barely mingling with the Melanesian or Papuan people in the whole region. They got across to Samoa, Tonga, Fiji about 3,000 years ago. Then things stopped for a couple of thousand years. And then about 1,000, 1,200 years ago, there's a big pulse that comes out of Samoa, out to the Eastern Pacific, up to, amazingly, up to Hawaii, and then back down to New Zealand. We can tell from the genetic diversity of the Maori in New Zealand that they were the last leg of the Polynesian expansion. So Lord Howe, an interesting anomaly. This photo was interesting. We came across it. It's unlabeled. It says Mioko and from 1896, and it does show a group of very interesting people. And my friend in Australia, Max Westritz, has confirmed that that's his great-grandmother in the front row, sitting in the middle, and Phoebe Coe Parkinson. She was one of the great agricultural pioneers of the Bismarck Archipelago. And according to him, I sent him this photo. He's been able to name some of the people in this photo. Her husband might be at the back, Sidney Parkinson, second from the left. So although it's quite a blurry photo, still for someone like me and someone like Tobias, who studies the Western Pacific, quite an exciting image. Just a bit more on her. Phoebe was the daughter of Jonas Coe, an American commercial representative to Samoa, and a Samoan lady called Leutu Tale Tale of the Malietoa dynastic clan. Phoebe was born in 1863 in Samoa and married her Danish husband, scientist Richard Parkinson, in 1879 before moving to New Britain. Phoebe, her famous sister was Queen Emma of New Guinea, Emma Coe Forsyth, and Phoebe were agricultural pioneers. Phoebe at Kurudui and Emma at nearby Ralum. And she learned the local Tali languages to go with her fluent English, Samoan, French, and German. And apparently her translations were critical to her husband's great tomes, like 30 Years in the South Seas. Phoebe's wide achievements in community welfare, dispute resolution, and education are still remembered in New Britain, and a school is named after her. She refused to move to Sydney and retire in harbourside luxury with her sister Emma, a decision that left her broke and eventually at the mercy of the Japanese occupiers in the Second World War. Phoebe died of starvation in a prisoner of war camp on the island of New Ireland in 1944. And she was buried nearby with her body tied to a door as a makeshift coffin. And her family, my friend Max Westritz being very prominent in the whole affair, in 2004, found her lost grave and reinterred her remains, including her burial crucifix, back at the family cemetery at Kurudui Plantation beside her husband. Now, there are images on display in the albums taken by Apia photographers that have not been seen before, or certainly not by myself, and especially by Apia photographer Thomas Andrew. Thomas Andrew was one of only 3 commercial photographers operating in the town in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and was the best studio photographer. The Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa, has the definitive collection of Andrew prints, numbering in the many thousands, but there are some examples from here that appear to be new to market, shall we say. This was one that that captured my eye because of its striking and sharp appearance. And I've been able to establish overnight that it's of a Tongan princess called Adi Kafubao. Her mother was Tongan and her father was Fijian. And the only other photos I've seen of her are that full-length, rather low-quality one, and one from a year or 2 later in her life. That I think that was taken in 1902 or 1905. So a wonderful addition for the Kafubao family of Fiji. That wonderful study by Thomas Andrew. This is a beautiful, idyllic, paradisical scene that is unknown in the Thomas Andrew canon, but it's in one of the albums, and he's written his inscription on the lower left, and I thought it might be at a place on Savaii called Lano, and people have come through and said, yes, there's a place that looks very much like this next to Lano called Pu'apua, and so I think we're homing in on where this superb photo, probably from the early 1890s, was taken. And another one taken by Andrew at a place called Tuffy Tuffy. One of the great things about these early photographers is they'll scrawl a description or the place name. And nowadays, no one knows where the hang these places are. There might be an old cultural custodian or historical person in some of these remote villages who will say, yes, that used to be down the coast, but that village moved inland, 50 years ago. So it's great to get these little historical enigmas. One of the other albums that was very important was this one from 1908 to 1910 from the Leipzig. And this album is important because it fills out the photographic portfolio of official naval photographs of Lauaki Namulaulu Mamoi, who was Samoan's most famous self-determination activist during the time prior to the German administration and during the German administration. And his party of chiefly allies and family members who were photographed on the stern of the German cruiser Leipzig shortly before their 6-year banishment to Saipan in the Western Pacific in April 1909 by the Salf administration. His Maua Pule movement posed a real threat to the stability of Samoa in that period when the likelihood of armed conflict was a distinct possibility, not so much between the German or European population and the Samoans, but between Samoans themselves. A clear majority of Samoans valued the peace that German rule had brought since 1900 and were happy to accept that trade-off in limitations on self-rule for the advantages of economic prosperity and an end to indigenous dynastic warfare that German annexation had brought. The main population centered on the island of Upolu opposed Lauaki's activist stance and his raising of an apparent force of warriors from Savaii, and they threatened to oppose them by force. So Governor Salf embarked on a campaign to quell this danger and called his intensive, successful tactics, carried out over many months, the work of my life. A final step in this pacification process involved Lauaki's peaceful surrender to authorities and the deportation of his camp followers, numbering over 100 people, and mainly from Savaii to Saipan. Now, I have to add that a great uncle of mine, Asiata Taitaloa, of a village called Satupa'itea on the southern coast of Savaii, was one of the chiefs who was deported. And he died in Saipan. Lauaki died also in exile. And so I have some personal motivations for being skeptical towards the German colonists, but equally I value balance in all my historical judgments. So this is a lead up to, I've always thought that the collection here at the DSM would answer the question of how many formal, carefully composed studies that were almost ceremonial in nature were taken by the naval photographer on the Leipzig on its stern that solemn day, the day before Lauaki and his camp followers were exiled to the Western Pacific. And the album appears to answer the question. A number of official photos were known to exist and have circulated broadly over the years, but the DSM Leipzig album appears to add 2 new images to the known portfolio. Maybe there are more as yet unsighted, but let's have a look at them. So these are known pictures that have been in circulation for many years, and that's Lauaki and with his wife Siva Tele. The caption says that these are his daughters. I don't believe that's true because they reappear with another chief where the caption says they're also his daughters. But my understanding is that Lauaki, I think, only had a son. And so the identity of these young women is unknown. And that's a photo of them solo. This is a photo that I discovered in a friend's collection a year or so ago and unveiled it on Facebook, on the Museum of Samoa Facebook page. And it went viral. And here again, this is a chief called Tuilangi Letasi. And we have one of the girls, and it's called his daughter this time. And this group photo of Lauaki sitting in the middle with some of the people. Some of these people may be getting off the boat before it goes to Saipan, and others went with Lauaki because quite a few family members went with them into exile. Now, here are the two. Now, see, these are previously unseen ones, at least by me, from the stern. And so the young man at the back is a guy called Ngalo Letasi, and Tuilangi Letasi on the right, and Lauaki on the left. And they're all orators because they have an orator's whisk over their shoulder, and 2 of them are holding orator's sticks. So that's new to me. It's probably out there, probably been seen by others, but not by myself. And then there is a solo one of Lauaki himself. And unfortunately, he appears to have moved his head slightly. It's slightly blurry, or the cameraman got the focus wrong. So sad in a way. And I know Governor Solf's wife, who he had just married some months before this all happened, Joanna Solf, she thought it was a very sad day in Samoan history. Now, naval photographers made available some of their work to the locals in Samoa, and that becomes clear to me from this photograph from the album, because in the Walter Lawson collection, a private family collection in Pennsylvania, we have almost the same photo taken probably a few seconds afterwards, and which was provided to me in high resolution. And it's a wider photo. The Walter Lawson Peter Lloydell collection, and some of the people in this. That's Mrs. Elsa Klinkmuller, daughter of an administration lawyer. Here's the Admiral of the Fleet. There are about 4 German cruisers in the harbour at this time. And not only did they take Lauaki away, but afterwards, when tensions had eased, they had a big cultural festival. And this appears to have been some of the audience for that cultural festival. So Admiral Carl von Kerper there, a woman called Mariah Beetham there, a young woman called Fusipala Easthope, and we also have a nice look at what appears to be a naval photographer, and I've zoomed in tight. You can see how finely detailed this wonderful photo was when you zoom in tight. And the guy on the extreme right appears to be the cameraman. That's a glass plate camera. He appears to be holding, I think, a roll film camera as well. So finally, we get a shot of a naval photographer with his camera.
Exciting, yeah.
And these are all new photographs from that cultural event that day. There are quite a few floating around, but this album shows completely new ones, at least to my assessment. So I think, to be fair, I think we probably got an air of relief and release in Apia amongst all the community that finally the activism and the danger that the dangerous atmosphere that had existed for some months has eased. And I suspect this event had quite a festive air about it. And you can see the German sailors on the right. Some interesting photographs in another folder, actually, of the Staatssekretär Solf, named after Solf and built on the request of the DH&PG building in Apia, a DH&PG company in Apia, and it was built in Germany in 1914. These photos, I think, are from its commissioning voyage, and good quality ones. I haven't seen them before. And this vessel played a part in the capitulation of the Germans to the invading New Zealanders at the outbreak of the First World War in 1914. The New Zealanders came into Samoa. The German administration peacefully surrendered, but they had got wind of the outbreak of war some weeks beforehand through their new telegraph station, and they had sent that boat to neutral American Samoa with a whole pile of cash. And in fact, Eric Schultz, the governor at the time, prepaid all of his civil servants with several months' salary in case things went pear-shaped, as they did. So there are many album photos apparently taken by naval photographers that relate more broadly to the activities of the German Navy in the East Asian theatre, which are of excellent quality and which excite me as a more general historian, as I said earlier. And I'd just like to conclude by flicking through a few of them. I mean, that's, to me, the German consulate in Shanghai. What an amazing building. And the German post office on the left. This superb photo of naval staff with some Chinese people. Wonderful, crisp resolution. And I think Tobias felt that this was, because it's in the context of other photos, this was the farewell gathering for ratings who were having who were going back to Germany and were being replaced by naval ratings coming in on civilian passenger liners. And that's what's apparently happening there. Do you know which port this is at all, Tobias? Would it be? It's not Tsingtao, is it?
I'm not sure.
No. So you can see that's a Norddeutschen line, Lloyd line vessel that's coming in. either taking away, probably bringing in new ratings, and they'll be replaced. They'll be replacing some of the ship's crews, and others will be going back to Germany via the civilian vessel. And the other thing that Tobias informed me was that the Germans were very, very interested in the outcome and the mechanics and the physics of the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 and 1905. And this is a photo that perhaps demonstrates that. And I love this one. This is one of the Russian ships we've determined with a shell hole on the side of its hull, side of its bow. So really interesting. Because we did have a look today, Tobias and I had a look at lots of additional albums on more general German naval history, and these photos are exceptional for their clarity. There's a lot of albums, of course, with not such high quality photography. So sincere thanks to the museum for the precious opportunity to research Samoa and Pacific related photography in their archives. It's been a wonderful privilege. Thanks so much, Ruth. And thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I think we have to thank you. I think this is more of an impressive result of a very short research stay. So perhaps I would like to ask Tobias to perhaps you were referred to and you made some comments. Perhaps you could comment a bit also on the collection in general and how you choose which things to talk about.
Yes. So probably I just add some comments from my view. What I found really interesting is I think we both agreed on which albums were, well, at this point, the most fruitful for us. It's like the first one from the Bussard has a lot of images with dates and places on it. Apparently, not all those places are like the total correct places. They were. Excuse me, they rather reflect like where the ports were, where the destination for the ships generally were. So I, for example, looked into more the Melanesian destinations, which is like 100% where the plantations were. And what is so interesting about this particular album is that with all the dates and the places, you can go in the archives. Especially, we should at some point go to Freiburg, but also into the Federal Archives and actually find out what the ship has done there, what the cruise has done there. So, it's a wonderful opportunity to contextualize these albums. And I've seen what you have done with your expertise on Samoa, and would love to add more value to this, to the archives. Throughout the weekend, I've tried to get a glimpse on what's at least in the Federal Archives, because it's digitized most of the sources. It also reflects the difficulties, because within the architecture of the Colonial Archives, a lot of source material is pretty much bound geographically to certain spots. So you have to navigate through a different source material, found out what the Bussard has done there. We haven't seen that particular picture there. So there is also a picture in that album that shows 16 indigenous police officers. And these 16 persons pop up in the archives as well. So that was within the given limited time till today. It was quite a good finding. Found out how a little bit more about how, especially prior to the turn of the century, how military vessels actually were used during that time. So since the majority of politics that were done were influenced by commercial interests, I always felt like these visits, in a real short amount of time, they come around pretty much, that there's like an additional view on what's taking place, because I get the impression that military personnel and the military vessels were also destined to overlook what the merchant companies are doing there. So, and this, in addition to what the pictures show of important events, such as the deportation of important chiefs, could help write a whole new story on some of those vessels. Since that is what makes it very interesting. These vessels are moving around. They are observing so many different spots in a short amount of time. So found out why we were a little confused about Lord Howe Island, for example. It's quite a trip from the Bismarck Archipelago compared to the other locations they visit. So task of the Bussard was to show flag, and we couldn't make sense of what that actually means in that context, because as far as I know, there has never been any particular interest of Germany on Lord Howe Islands. Yes, so it was for me like a friendly reminder how important like it is to get various source material together, both the photographic material and then also the archival resources, which I mainly rely on. Also I learned a lot. We browsed when we browsed through some other albums today. I had made the experience with probably the wrong location, so it's always also important to be aware of like easy descriptions. So I think there's a lot of wonderful work that can be done with these albums, which had not so far been done. I mean, Gisela Parak has done a great exhibition, but from a probably a different point of view. So lot of things to do.
That sounds good. Perhaps I could things to do. That's a good keyword. I was very impressed by the specific names. So you could really name persons and the photographies, and you said that you have like a mental map of a family is a bit involved there, also connected to you and displaying a lot of personal knowledge, I would say. And I would just like to know if and how you see the value of this evidence for these family histories, and would it be perhaps important to then to put them online, but to first perhaps contact with families and talk about it, or perhaps just give us some thoughts about this connection between the photographs and the family histories you displayed.
Well, I sent that photograph of Phoebe Coe Parkinson to her great grandson in Sydney last night, and he came back to me this morning and said, "Wow, what a wonderful surprise to wake up and receive that photo that we've never seen before of her." And as I pointed out, he was able to name quite a few people. I think that is the value of putting historical photography online, and especially on social media. I mean, I am co-administrator for the Museum of Samoa Facebook page, and I'm the one who tends to upload historical photography, usually photography no one's seen before, because I tend to specialize in private collections, private albums, because all the public collections are safeguarded. So I have networked for many years with private families digitizing their collections. It's a win-win. They get to keep their collections and we get to get digital copies of them. So but I think putting them online, as we have done, look, we have put countless photographs, hundreds and hundreds online on social media, and we get feedback from people, identifying people, in other words, de-anonymizing Indigenous natives. So we get people identified, we get locations identified, we get cultural practices identified. So it's the way to go, in my opinion, and I'm a great believer in putting photographs online and on social media. And look, we put one photograph up from the Otto Tetens collection, which is a private collection held by the Nigaman family in Bochum. We put it up on the Museum of Samoa Facebook page about 4 months ago. And it went viral. It had an audience of 700,000 people, which is 3 times the population of Samoa, who saw it. And it's not unusual for photographs to be seen on the Museum of Samoa Facebook page and to receive audiences of hundreds of thousands. So I'm a great believer in getting photography out with a minimum of cultural baggage around it. It can be a pretty bare bones description and let people come up with their own comments, sort of like democratizing history. I put out my second book on the recently discovered album of Carl Hansen, the last manager of the DH and PG in Samoa, which we sort of discovered it through his granddaughter in the Netherlands 6 or so years ago. I put the book out, but we pre-published most of the photos. She gave me a high-resolution scan of the whole album. We got so much out of that. And in my book, we got so many comments. And what I did when we put up all these photographs progressively over about two or 3 months was we got so many comments that I made a record of the people who made the comments. And in the book, these 70 people get acknowledged along with other references as well. So we are using Facebook as a citable source. And look, I know academia tries to steer clear of social media, but as I said in my class last week at Bremen University, I would rather be read than cited. I just think communicating history to as wide an audience as possible is the way to go.
Yeah. So we didn't. I think you had enough time to perhaps think of questions or comments on which you would like to pose to our two experts here. Mrs. Bankowski.
Yeah, I just realized a question when you were talking about putting the photographs online, because some of them might also contain some cultural aspect or holy spiritual aspect that we as experts don't know about. How would you suggest one should act with that? Because putting them online can also hurt many people.
Sure. Yeah. Now look, New Zealand museums are doing that. They are holding back photography, Maori photography, which they deem to have cultural sensitivities. And I think if you have any doubts about posting particular photographs, get some advice first, maybe from the locals or I agree with you. It's not just because I hold back some photography as well, of course, totally, because it's not appropriate to put online. And so, yeah, I think just get advice from people who might be closer to the whole cultural context than you are.
Yeah, that's a good point. Other questions? Alexander?
But whom can we ask then? I mean, we have this topic now, as we have a new sort of way to publish now. We have this sort of so-called digital depot. We put many photos online, but we are thinking about, for example, this collection Shia. It's the same. He was a marine photographer or a naval photographer, and he has a lot of people from all the islands where the ship went to photographed. And yes, it's exactly the point we are thinking about. Yes, whom can we perhaps, or where can we get advice perhaps? I know there's a handbook, isn't there a handbook written about this topic at the moment, Tobias? So perhaps we can
Yeah, so there are some advices in the guidelines of the Museum Association. Yet I still think that comes from a real practical point of view. So what makes it really complicated, especially for those albums, is that they reflect a lot of different cultural groups, since it's albums made on voyages. What I've learned, especially to also from the international fellowship with Lisa Healy we had here, is to take the effort and then speak with the communities, or if you have the opportunity, like the Samoan Museum or the National Museum and Art Gallery in Port Moresby, just to make contact. That will take time. That is probably will cost something. People are, especially in Melanesia, from what I've heard from the Melanesians I've talked to, they are always more interested in cooperation rather than just giving like some legal advice. But I think this pretty much depends on the actual photograph, and if you can identify those groups, and it will be a lot of work, it will take time, it will probably cost some money, but it's necessary if you want to make it like in a proper way. But the good part is it could result in some really, really nice corporations, and it's I think very important to open your mind to like inputs from those people on display on these pictures. Yeah, it will come out very, very different from first people in Australia, for example. It's not for a lot of them, it's not very very common to like publish pictures of deceased people without a cultural advice, and so it's a large world we live in, so it gets complicated the more people we have in our photographs.
I think it takes courage. It's an act of courage and an act of disclosure to put stuff on the internet, because it's immediately got a worldwide audience. So it's a big responsibility, and I've often worried about photographs that I felt were borderline, but I thought, let's stuff it, let's put it out there. And 9 times out of 10, in fact, probably 10 times out of 10, you can get away with it, and it attracts a lot of interest, a lot of praise. I mean, I put up some censored photographs of Samoan males who had elephantiasis, and we actually blacked out part of their bodies, but people said to me afterwards, "Man, that was a gutsy thing to do, to put that photography online." And but I think it pays off. I think the act of boldness in saying, "Well, this is marginal. Do I or don't I put this up?" I think it pretty much, in my experience, it always pays off to do it.
Yeah, I most certainly agree. Alexander, what is your strategy then at the Digitale Depot? Do you already have one concerning putting our DSM images online?
We haven't written it down yet, but also Dr. Baumshold, she wants to have a workshop on this topic, as we don't have only photographs, but also we have some propagandic sort of pictures or huge placards, and so sometimes, as you said, a sort of risk or sort of decision how to deal with it. So I think, yes, you cannot be 100% sure. I mean, if there's someone who really searches for and tries to trace people back, they would find perhaps reason to complain about. But on the other hand, these photographs of Chira They are already online since several years and no one complained about it. But now there's this discussion at the moment about this topic, so we have to rethink it.
Yeah, I think the ambivalence lies in the fact that you, on the one hand, need to make them accessible. Otherwise, no one could complain because people just don't know what's actually out there, especially from places far away who have not the easy access to like archives and museum storage rooms. On the other hand, it's then another easy way to find like a strategy. Probably, I think we really need to discuss this in a separate workshop. I think like using cultural disclaimers is necessary, of course, and then it will take some time to really find a way to navigate through this ambivalence.
Gisela Parag already touched this topic. I saw she described some pictures very detailed, and some of these women, apparently they had, as we saw, their breasts not covered, so we don't know was it voluntarily or not, or something like that. So you have all these sort of aspects to keep in mind, and some of the scenes were not were sort of staged, and I think there was a scene, I don't know whether you saw it, this picture where they carried a murdered person around or something like that, and apparently it was sort of staged. It wasn't a true photograph. So actually we have to explain as well the photos, and that's difficult. We need to do special research on it. And yes, perhaps we need the cooperation then with the museums there and ask them. And we have also many photographs from China. I had 2 albums. I looked at 2 albums as far as the connection to Tsingtao is concerned, and then there were also pictures from all over the Asian area put in the photograph in the album. Just perhaps people in Germany wanted to have an impression where all the ships were going. So you had photos from Tsingtao, from Japan, from places like Shanghai, and also the islands. Don't know whether you saw these these photo albums as well.
This leads me to one point which struck me, and I have to say that I'm not at all as expert as you, also connected to our collection. One didn't see much of Tsingtao or Chinese people in these pictures, did one?
No.
And I find that rather puzzling.
There were some.
Somewhere, but not. It's somehow, especially in these group scenes, you see Germans and you see Samoans, but you don't see any other groups.
What came out of my look at the albums today, many albums, was the lack of what I call documentarian photography, and it's more posed, it's more scenic, it's more our group being photographed, but. You know, I like documentarian photography that tries to get at the truth of a given situation without manipulation or setting up. And the Otto Tetens collection of 730 photos from Samoa between 1902 and 1905, taken by Tetens, who set up the Geophysical Observatory in Samoa over that period, a German scientist. And he took 4,000 glass plate negatives, of which only 700 have survived, mainly in print form rather than the glass plates. And so his photography is simply amazing. And I gave a talk at the Hafen Museum in Bremen on it some weeks ago. And but I'm a big fan of what I call documentarian photography, where there is very little of that in the albums, to be honest, because I mean, these guys are naval ratings. They're They're not many of them are trying to document foreign cultures in a sort of a truthful way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think like the plurality of source material is important. You just don't see everything in those pictures. So like plantation work, labor is usually not on display. Or even like, now I like the English word again, die Personen, die im Kohlekessel arbeiten, die Kohle. Jesus.
Comes our shipper.
So we just today found one picture where that is documented. It's really rare.
Superb. We call them coal stokers.
But perhaps asking the students from the seminar, Maritime and Colonial History, you know, we try to look at the interdependence between ships and harbors, infrastructure, personals involved. In what terms could these be useful sources for the general questions of our seminar? Any ideas? Or you could also say no, we are totally rubbish. I don't want to use it. Or any first impressions on the photography? What do they tell us about colonial structures, perhaps in general?
One of the things that needs to be pointed out, Ruth, is that I don't think you can talk too aggressively about colonialism in Samoa prior to 1900, when it was officially annexed by Germany. So that prior period, for example, I don't think you can describe that as a colonial period, because while the three powers were preserving their right to determine legal cases involving Europeans, nominally they left Samoan affairs to the Samoans, nominally. So to describe that long period of European contact between 1830 and 1900 as a colonial period is not completely correct. You know, I just call it pre-1900, or you know, so it's very easy to I think not demonize, but put an inappropriate label on a lot of photography, just referring it generally, it as colonial era, when I think it needs a more nuanced approach.
That's totally true. But I think this can be also done by looking at these photographies and perhaps you can help us, perhaps some ideas of how you can use these source material in order to.
Well, I think what you can see there is like when it comes to the nuances, how the Germans approached Samoans in a different way than they approached Melanesians, for example, and like this whole deportation process. And while simultaneously trying to keep like the local politics intact, is a thing they would probably not do in Melanesia. So since it's rather small groups, and when it comes to conflict, it's easier for the Germans to choose violence. So the Bussard, and this is not, for example, reflected in the images, did get like requests for 6 or 7 punitive expeditions, did not perform all of these. So it's always when like the merchants, like the men on the spot, request for those punitive exhibitions, but they did some. So I think in Samoa, and this is just my impression from someone who's not too deep into the archives regarding Samoa, they showed kind of more awareness. I would not probably like Yeah, I think it's about the nuances, and it's shown in the images from these deportation processes, and there are. So from what I've seen this weekend, they when they go to Yalué, to Marshall Islands, they try to figure out if Mataafa Yosefo is treated well. So it's probably the thing they wouldn't do with most Melanesian leaders. And yeah, so it adds value. So it shows something and it's reflected in the images. But as I said, I always think you need both sides, both the archival material and the images.
Yeah, I'll be talking on this in Munich next Tuesday on the gap between the truth of a situation and what the photographs tell us in Samoa. Because there is a gap in some areas, like in the treatment of Melanesians on the large German plantations, quite abusive from time to time, but of course it doesn't show in the photographic record. So what I'm planning to do in Munich is make some distinctions about what the photographs tell us and then what the archives tell us.
Yeah, I think that's true. And looking at the material, I was also trying to think about the Navy soldiers involved in the pictures, because I mean a lot of them have been really young, and you showed this group picture in the interior in this restaurant or wherever, and I think connecting to your question, I mean these are also persons, their families behind it, biographies, and we don't know mostly who was involved and under which circumstances they were really taking pictures of, because I mean they're probably not asked for permission. And I then started to think about how did they really experience their stay there, and what did they take home and told here. So I think there's a lot of personal stories connecting both spheres, and you can start by looking at these images, I guess.